Hi everyone and welcome back. We are going to continue our course. This video is about DNS. Showing you what we have up to now. This is the files we created. Last session we were talking about route. Up to now we covered log, the inbound, outbound route, and this session is about DNS. I am going to copy route to DNS JSON JQ, the last item, which is okay, and this was our server, so running this is C is the router, which is the first one, just as a test, make sure everything is as usual. We had two outbounds and then that's it. I mean the mix in was going to XYZ. Sandbox run C, it was DNS. You're going to implement DNS, and the curl should not sandbox, curl should x http 1990 ip5.org echo. It's okay. It's going to connect to this local one. The inbound from the XYZ goes to the outbound that we have been selecting, and then comes to the server and it's going to be natted, and then we see the IP address of this server. For the purpose of this, I'm going to update my DNS server that I have. Actually, before checking that, showing that I have added this domain address proxy short proxy myname.net, and the address is going to be resolved, so 1.com, anything else that we have here. And I'm going to disable my DNS forwarders, like to something that doesn't exist. I mean, we do not have, or I do not have 127.0.0, for example, or 44. I do not have them. Okay, and if I try to resolve, it doesn't work, which means I don't have access to any DNS servers now. You can see it doesn't work. So I'm going to have this domain and update the DNS file 94, delete and paste, delete inside code and paste. So we have right now the two outbounds and the domain that usually this is the best practice. We do not specify IP address, we use the domain name in case of changing them. So if we run them again this time, and then running the server here, also we know that we do not have any DNS forwarders to resolve the domain, and if we request, it's going to resolve the domain address, and it can't, and because of this it fails. So that's the reason that you want to talk about DNS and implement an internal DNS to resolve the domain. So let's go to the documentation. The third one is DNS, and we have this keys in DNS object, servers, roles, finals, and blah blah blah. Also the server one, here I have opened that. The server has tag address, blah blah, and the roles has this, for example, inbound, outbound, connected to it. It's kind of like the role that we had was for route, but a little bit not as straightforward as the route one, because we have to define at least these two main objects. So here, I mean the DNS, the servers, and the roles. Copy. Coming back, still it doesn't work. Going to the top, it doesn't matter which section we paste this, but I'm going to add it here. So we have DNS, we have servers. Inside servers, do not forget that we have objects, and inside roles also we have objects. Okay, so going back to server, we have tag and address. This is the two primary one. Server, we have tag and address. Removing the, and then yeah, it's okay. For example, I name this server. This is the first. Let me explain that server means this is a server that we want to refer to as a forwarder, and the role is going to somehow make a decision or policy based on the name. So tag, I name it Google. Okay, and I address is 8888. That's the server that we have. The role says, okay, domain is proxy.net. Okay, this is the, let me check that's correct. Yeah. Okay, and then we say server is Google, which means if you try to resolve and didn't know about this domain, you should ask this DNS server to resolve that. So this is the configuration is okay. JQ DNS, it's okay. Sandbox run C DNS. There's a point, there's a trick I want to show. Not trick really, there's a point which is a little bit confusing, but I will get to that. Why? Because if I run this, it doesn't work. Okay, it's not about this one, it's about that it cannot find a route to go out to connect to this one, even we have it. So ping C4 888, we have access to the Google DNS server, but it cannot. And if we notice this, there is a point I want to a little bit, the terminal is very noisy. Run it again, a little bit calming down. You can see here almost that route to Google, even for connecting to Google, the 888.8.53, which is the DNS server UDP, it goes to sucks out. And this is again about the implicit role which Sandbox does. Right now, the request comes to this one and it asks this one that what should I do? The problem is from this server to connect to 8888, it asks the sucks outbound to connect that. And we know that it doesn't have the real IP address, which means we need something here, or there is a default kind of implementation, or defining something that from this one selects the very first one as a default one, and the rule is detour, which says by default the first one. So I'm going to XYZ, which I am telling this, if something came here and you want to connect to the server, go to XYZ. We know that XYZ inbound also has the domain address, which means it doesn't work, but we just want to test and make sure it's the problem. So right now it goes to sucks out. Remember this. Clean up. Run again. Okay. It wants to connect to this, and you can see here this is XYZ, which means we have to, even the IP address we added here, the 88888, doesn't connect directly because of modularity and somehow flexibility. We want to be able to connect to different outbound. To test this, I'm going to change this to for example Google out. Okay, and then I come here and then I make a copy of this outbound, and then a comma, and then paste, and then I make this tag Google out, and then I remove the and paste the IP address that we had here. IP address, where's the IP address? I forgot the IP. Oh, I can copy it from the root. Okay, so what I did, or what I'm going to do, I'm going to define a outbound which has a direct IP, so Google can get out from this IP. And I can understand the reason behind this implementation is for having flexibility to select whatever the output is. Just we have the third outbound which can connect directly to the server to resolve the first one. So the first one doesn't know how to connect because we are going to connect to this one. Sorry, this second one. We want to connect to this one. It doesn't know what is the IP address of this domain. It asks the DNS server. The DNS server doesn't know how to go out, so it goes to Google out. Google out means go and ask this IP address to go out and reach out the Google DNS server. Okay, run it again one more time. Google out. You can see Google out. It didn't work, but it went to Google out packet. The reason I'm not sure. Let me what does it mean. Okay, it came back, which means it probably did kind of caching. So Google out. Go out. Ask this through the proxy, the third outbound, through the third outbound comes here. It resolves the domain. It gets back, and then the first one is going to connect, which means this is the outbound for the DNS server that we have, forwarded DNS server, not the DNS server. So one thing, if you can remember, I can want to remove this, that we had a kind of outbound type was direct. So which means we do not have defined any servers. It doesn't resolve anything, it just goes out. Okay, so let's try it one more time. This is much faster because it directly connects to Google from my machine. It worked. Just for test, for the sake of test, I can change this Google out to, like, for example, ABC. ABC. Okay, ABC. We have ABC, and now if I try it again, it goes to ABC to find the IP address of this domain, and then the XYZ inbound connects to this one because it's going to be resolved for the outbound XYZ, and then the IP of the server is going to be returned, which is natted by this one. So a little bit complex actually, but this is how it works. And I can give you a kind of summary that we have a DNS object. Give it here, let me highlight the whole thing. We have a DNS object, and with the most DNS object, and the DNS object has two primary servers and roles. So server is defined, usually the IP address of the thing that we want to, for example, ask for the resolution, the resolving the domain. And then we have a role. For example, we define this domain should be resolved with this server, but it needs a way, a kind of route or whatever you name it, to go out to reach out the real Google server, which means we have to define we have to define outbound, and if we do not define it, it picks the first one. And since the first one had the domain, it wasn't able, a kind of cycling was happening. It wasn't able to find that or connect that. But if we define an outbound which has a direct type here, direct type, it's going to work, or going to resolve the domain that we have. So a kind of type direct, and whatever the tag is usually need, or any kind of configuration you saw with Sandbox, you see the syntax, which means this is for direct connection to outside of the machine Sandbox is running. So hopefully it's clear. A little bit it was confusing for me, for myself personally, but right now hopefully it's clear for you. And this was the basic of DNS in Sandbox. It can be much more complicated with much more features that it has, but this is the basic and fundamental one. That's it. That's enough for DNS and talking about DNS. Thank you for watching. Let's go to next video.